Fire! Fire!
Hey,
William, how's it going?
how are you?
Doing okay, how are you?
Good. What's with all the hair?
You know, trying to express something, I guess, or not. I mean, it's just
Can't
it
afford a
happened.
haircut?
No, it's the best haircut that I've gotten where I realized I actually have curly hair was in Richmond, Virginia, and I haven't been back since June. I think the haircut was in April, but I'm going back. My first gig of the season is a gala down there this weekend. So I think if I can get the same lady to do her magic, then you'll see a different me. But sadly, that's not till the future.
So, so what is your goal with your hair?
Well, I mean, if you can toss it around, then people in the audience have something to look at in case they're not listening.
Well, that's true, but seriously, do you want it to be kind of longish and curlish?
Why not? You know,
I'm just asking. No
what does
passing judgment here.
hey, listen, if you hate it, I'll shave the whole thing and then we can have a whole different
Oh,
conversation.
that'd be great. All right. Well, let's do that next time.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
How are
And
you? It's good to see you.
good to see you. You're in where?
I'm at home. I'm in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Okay. All right. I keep forgetting that you're in Brooklyn. I keep
I,
wanting to put you in Philadelphia, but I get
I
it.
was I was in Philly for some years and I moved in 2020 to Brooklyn. So
And how's it working out for you in Brooklyn?
I mean, it's great. I'm hardly here. We're on the road a lot. I'm doing a lot of concertizing, and I've sort of this is the first sort of long stretch of time this last latter half of August where I've actually been home and not had really anything to do. So it's been kind of amazing, actually. I have to say. I understand why people take time off now.
Oh yeah, there's a point to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. If you can
exactly.
afford to take the time off, there's that. So.
So anyway, I wanted to get this conversation going about overrated composers. And I don't like the term overrated because that means you've got to use somebody else's rating system and you have to defend it or take shots at it. To
Mm.
me, the big issue is, are there composers you think that are overappreciated? And the reason that this comes to mind is I have a friend who's a professor of art,
Mm.
and when she looks at the paintings of Renoir, for example,
Mm.
she kind of shudders and looks away. And yet, my guess is a great portion of the population might think Renoir's paintings are nice. Right?
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, so to take that analogy, and it's funny because ahead of this conversation, I was thinking about that term overrated. But I think you're right. Overappreciated may be closer to the thing that I sort of have a problem with. And this can become a far-ranging conversation. But I'm thinking it's funny you mentioned Philadelphia because one of the largest collections of Renoir, of course, is the Barnes Foundation. And you look at sort of one, you go, wow, that's incredible. And you've spent your good hard-earned money. I think it's $50 to get in now if you're not a member. And you go around and there's a Renoir, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then the subject matter doesn't change that much. The style doesn't really change that much. It's like he figured out a thing that worked and then sort of did that a lot. So are we rating art or artists or composers based on like prolificness, like if or consistency, like what is that rating? And so I would agree with you. I was overwhelmed the few times I've been to the Barnes by the Renoir because I'm like, wow, this is like sumptuous and overwhelming, but it's not that much different from you don't see a real progression in maturity or style necessarily in the same sense that you do perhaps more subtly, but certainly radically with like Cezanne, or even Monet. I mean, you see Monet across his life. At the beginning, he's painting these, vast seascapes or landscapes, and so the subject matter is very small and kind of detailed, but you have these huge kind of ideas. And of course, as he gets older and as his eyesight starts to go, the subject matter becomes singular. And so we get the lily pads, we get his garden, and that's the only thing he's painting. And of course, the details in a way kind of washed out, but it's also like more focused. So, you see this large scale transformation. I mean, there's composers that are played a lot too. So then maybe that raises another question: like, are there composers that are overprogrammed? And for me, I'm honestly at this point I could almost write a dissertation on it, but it sort of becomes a question of how are you listening to music? If say you're a subscriber to the Atlanta Symphony, right? Are you sitting there going, well, I better see my Beethoven 5 or my Beethoven 9 or my Bruckner 7 or am I seeing my war horses where I'm going to feel comforted almost in a ritualistic way, like I'm going to church on Sunday. Well, I'm going to the symphony on Saturday night or Friday night or Sunday or whatever. I want to hear my Tchaikovsky six. Gosh darn it, I don't see it this season. Who are these composers that I don't recognize? So there's the ritualistic kind of listener, and then there's the responsive listener. And I think these are really two different camps, or maybe a combination of both. The responsive listener is sitting there going, hey, what's this new experience I'm going to have on Friday or Saturday or Sunday? Am I reacting to that? Do I like it? Do I not like it? And I think you can really largely divide people and subscribers into sort of two camps. And so I think for the ritualistic people, you're going to see the overprogrammed composers because that's what they expect. That's what they want to hear. And if they see something new, God forbid they have to have a real time reaction and possibly even an opinion. So,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
I agree with you. I think there's also another differentiation. One is from your viewpoint as a professional musician, mine
mm,
as a professional listener.
mm,
They may be very different. You,
I would hope I'm also a professional listener.
yeah, but I'm sure I'm in a concert hall seat more frequently than you are because you're up on stage.
Possibly, possibly. I just from the numbers alone, I don't think it's possible for me to be working as much as I am on stage and you know be
Right,
able.
but you get my point. I'm an audience member almost all the time.
That's a good point. That's a really good
Yeah.
point.
Anyway, so what I was thinking is that if you're going to talk about composers you think are overappreciated, that really has to do with your own level of what's tolerable to you. For example, this is the example I always use.
Mm,
I think Tchaikovsky is overappreciated. And the reason that I think he's overappreciated, which also translates into overplayed, is I think he uses gimmicks in his compositions, false starts, false endings. He uses introductions that have nothing to do with the rest of the piece. He uses accents like in the French horns that sometimes, if the conductor isn't careful, they take over the melody. Those kinds of things. I think his transitions, his setups to the next big theme always bother me because I can see them coming. It's like a
mm,
ballet dancer who is getting in position for the next big twirl.
mm.
You see them getting into position. I see Tchaikovsky getting into position for his next big thing. It's like Meryl Streep getting into position for her next Oscar win. So,
I like
and
that. Can I stop you here for a minute? Because I think you touched on something really telling. I think first and foremost, Tchaikovsky, and it's funny because I was just recently listening to the first three symphonies, which aren't done as much, which I think are fascinating in their own right. Of course, four, five, and six get done all the time. Manfred occasionally, but I think of Tchaikovsky primarily as a ballet composer. You think of his most appreciated, most performed work, it's the Nutcracker, and even he was like, I've written so much music. Why are you guys latching on to this one? But you think, was it Swan Lake and sort of, yeah, there is this sense of if I'm setting something up, then I have to deliver in a certain way. And I can see that being gestural or gimmicky or something. I find that Tchaikovsky, for me personally, really understands how music occupies time and what that does to an emotional narrative. And so in that sense, I actually think he's underappreciated because we've taken those things for granted. And you see that in film scores, you see that in other ballets. I feel like, I don't know how much, Wagner and Tchaikovsky had to do with each other, but I feel like sort of parallel, they're having influence in ways that we almost take for granted now. But yeah, I mean, to your point of like seeing what's about to happen, I can see that. I can totally see that as a valid observation. Um, I haven't. I'm
by
lucky.
the way,
Yeah,
I think his first symphony is the best.
I think two is great. I love two. I think
Yeah. I
C
what
seven
I
is trying.
what I love
Yeah.
about One, it's subtitled Winter Dreams. I
Mm.
can see that sleigh and horse going over the frozen Russian landscape.
Okay, so
No problem.
it's vivid for you as far as like a programmatic thing.
And the
Yeah, I can see.
second movement is so warm and so enveloping as a
Mm,
counter to the coldness of the first. So I really like it. And I know it's underplayed, but when
mm.
I hear it, I absolutely love it. Four, five, and six, I don't think I could care whether I hear it again or not, just because it's been done so much.
Well, let me ask you though, and this is, I think, part of what you're getting at in this sort of under or overappreciated or overprogrammed. Is it because you've heard it enough now that you've been personally like satisfied, like your soul, William Ford, has heard these things, and like you get the picture now? Like, is
Yeah,
it
I
actually
think that's part of it, but I also don't like his gimmicks. From just a compositional point of view, I don't like them, and I don't see those gimmicks like in the First Symphony.
interesting? I see him really, really trying to be taken seriously as like a new professor, and so he's like putting every compositional device in that, and he sort of chills out in the second one, and then he's doing weirder things in the third one.
Yeah,
I don't know, four and five I could kind of. I think six is a masterpiece. I think six should be played
I
every
don't
season,
I
every.
don't disagree with that at
Really?
all. It's just I've heard it too much.
You heard it too much, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
it has an unusual structure, and I kind of like that.
yeah.
Um, it's and to some degree, it's like Mahler, which is I don't think Mahler actually writes symphonies. I
Mm,
think he writes a series of tone poems. Only we call them movements of a symphony.
mm,
That's not to say it's bad at all. Uh,
mm.
but after a while, like when I get to the Seventh Symphony of his, I think, geez, I've heard this all before. Except
Like
he throws in that mandolin for God knows what reason.
he had a
Um,
mandolin for a friend. I don't know. Well,
I
yeah,
guess
in that sense, I can totally respond to that in the sense of like, if you hear enough of one composer, you start sort of hearing what they do.
they're
In the same,
gimmick.
the gimmick. And so if Tchaikovsky, it's sort of the repetitiveness or like the building over a long period of time. For me, for Mahler, it's march music. Every symphony has some sort of march,
Right.
whether it's an entire movement or it's a section. And again, that's sort of I don't know if it's a signature, but it's certainly one of his things. I was just struck recently. What did I just hear? Um, I was hearing Mahler. Sorry, I was hearing the Beethoven Ninth Symphony. The third movement of the Ninth Symphony is really all of where Mahler gets the slow movements. I mean, so on top of great symphonists having their own struggles, in their own life, but then on top of that, having to contend with Beethoven, of course, that's Brahms' problem. So you have this like, how do I distinguish myself in a field that is already oversaturated by one of the greatest of all times? How do you mess with that, right? So that's part
Well,
of it too.
and of course, I shared with you that one article about the 20 great composers. No, I sent you the article of,
This is the BBC one where they're
yeah,
also
right,
sort of,
where the people were
yeah,
talking about the composers they don't like, which,
right, right.
and I know lists like that are designed to create conversation. And I
Mm,
felt some of their nominations were unbelievable.
mm,
Mendelssohn and Brahms.
mm,
I get Britten, but nevertheless, I know there are a lot of people who don't like Brahms.
mm.
Um, so yeah, we all have our opinions. I just saw a list of the 20 greatest American composers.
Oh wow.
Included in that, and this is again from BBC,
Okay.
including in that were Duke Ellington, George Gershwin, Roy Harris, I get that, George Crumb,
Mm,
Bernstein, eh, um, Florence Price. And again, it's a list, I think, designed to create conversation. And many of those designations I would disagree with, even though they put them in order. And of course, um, Aaron Copland is the greatest American composer, yada, yada, yada.
okay.
Um,
Well, yeah,
but
sure. I mean, again, who's
it,
deciding these? And it also, I feel like, who's it? Baudelaire or someone said, the measure of artistry is the the ratio of effort to effect, which I think is really interesting. I think he meant it in terms of painting, but if you think of like how influential some of these people are, I would argue that someone like Bernstein is way more influential than Copland, in certain circles. I mean, we think as classical music lovers or whatever, yeah, we hear like Appalachian Spring a lot in the Third Symphony, but I think if you think of classical music and you ask anyone on the street, and you say, "Hey, West Side Story," they go, "Oh, I know that one," but you're like fanfare for the common man, and you're like, "I'm sorry, what did you call me?" It's like I think it depends on sort of what degree of household name we're talking about, and yeah, I think it's great that this list includes people like Duke Ellington. I mean, that's someone that should be studied in conservatory as a legitimate composer. But then, of course, that opens up the whole can of worms of like, who are we considering classical? Who are we excluding for whatever reasons and however unfair they are? I think the Florence Price thing is very interesting because, of course, a lot of her work was only pretty recently rediscovered. I think a lot of it stands on its own. I mean, I think if you wanted to have a conversation of her contemporaries, I mean, she was if you had to put boxing gloves on these people, she was duking it out with Gershwin, frankly, and Gershwin on a certain level, had all the privileges of his gender and his race at the time, and so in a way,
And his
some
money.
which he worked for. It's not like he wasn't a trust fund baby. I mean,
Right.
he
I
was
agree. Yeah.
doing, you know, but like Florence Price, in a way, then is punching way above her weight class, considering all of the things going on at the time. So again, how do you make these lists? I think there's a certain fallacy to the whole thing.
Oh, I agree with you. And also, of course, we could really argue that maybe we should be talking about who are the greatest symphonists.
Okay, that narrows it down. We sort of
But
started
even
talking.
then, you have to define, well, what do you mean by symphony?
So
And
do
we
you
all
include
can't agree on that.
right? And so do you include Richard Strauss? Is he one of the great symphonists, or is that his own form that he's created? So
Exactly.
you see La Mer, is that a symphony? Is it a tone poem? Like how are we defining these things?
Exactly.
If we keep going down this route, we're going to have seven musicologists who are going to comment on this video.
I know.
you know,
But
but
do you,
yeah.
is there a composer
Hmm.
that you think people like, and you just don't?
Hmm. That people like, and I just
Just
don't.
in a very simplistic sort of way.
Like knee-jerk reaction. Well, it's interesting. I mean, okay, take Britain for example. It's been a slow burn for me on Britain, and I'm starting to get into Britain actually through the string quartets. I have to say, of course, he's a great opera composer. There's the War Requiem that I don't know as well as I should. So there are a few like major works of Britain where I'm like, man, I really need to appreciate this better, and I think I'm starting to, and I'd like to because I want to understand, how to contextualize, his music and his moment. Um, I go back and forth with someone like Shostakovich. I mean, I love Shostakovich. He was incredibly influential to me as a young, artist, and I kind of come back and forth with him because I go, oh, I see what you're doing there, or you're quoting yourself, or you're using your little shtick, now and again, but there's some of his music that is just some of the most profound stuff ever written. So, I go back and forth with that. Wagner for me, I still haven't really gotten into. I get it. I get why, but that's one where, I should do more research and really sit with his music because I know that it's been very influential, but I have problems with him the man. I also have problems with him the artist. I feel like sometimes it just goes on and on and on. That guy didn't believe in arrest, like Tchaikovsky. Although Tchaikovsky, sometimes you get a breath and then something dramatic. Wagner, it's like he hated silence or something. He just had to
Right.
keep talking. You know,
Well, that's how I feel about Bruckner.
well, similarly, yeah. But Bruckner's interesting to me. I'm fascinated by Bruckner in the sense I'm not fascinated by Wagner. I need someone to take me through Wagner and say this is why this is great. For Bruckner, I'm like, that's how did he get from A to B to F, and where's all of the rest of the letters? And he's more interesting to me right now as an artist.
Well, of course, he wasn't composing operas and
No, and so
Wagner
that was
was, which is a big difference. I
yeah.
always thought that Bruckner could benefit from a big red pencil to,
Well, that's the whole problem with his scholarship is that any advice, any suggestion he took, and he would edit. And so, there's this whole body of his own self-criticism and editing. And so like, what version are you playing? For I think all of the symphonies, and that's really almost the only thing he did. I mean, he did some choral stuff. He has a few. There's the quintet, right, for chamber music, but that was his obsession, and he was so reviled by his contemporaries. He was thought of as a country bumpkin, but I think there's a lot to be. I've been personally inspired in my own process as a composer by Bruckner. I don't know that I necessarily want to play a symphony. It's very taxing. There's a lot of like tremolo. It's very, very tiring for the strings. But I would say I've never heard Bruckner live. I've played it. I played the Fourth Symphony a few times. I'd love to hear like seven or eight live, just to feel what that feels like.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just that it seems to me the hour-long symphony really should have been over in a half hour. Um,
Well,
that's what bothers me about him.
yeah. By the same
Um,
token, say that about Mahler, I suppose too.
Absolutely,
They're long
absolutely,
songs. They're very long songs.
exactly. So, um, any other composer that, by the way, I have to say also, I do believe that Tchaikovsky's String Quartet number one, that second movement, is absolutely stunning.
Well,
It's gorgeous.
I think the majority of people who've heard that would agree with you. I mean, it's one
Yeah,
of the most.
and The Souvenir of Florence,
That's a
gorgeous.
and that one I think is less compositionally acute. It's not like it's a little like I would edit a few things if it were me personally.
Hmm.
I've played both the violin parts, and like that second violin part, man, you're just going ba da beep ba da for like 20 minutes at a time. So like I would do things a little differently if it were me. Of course, it's not me, and it's a beautiful. He also edited. I think he sensed that there were maybe some structural problems, and so he edited, I want to say, the last movement quite a bit. So the version we know today of Souvenir de France is like markedly different.
Hmm.
Um, and I would love to go and sort of spend time with the original to see like what he changed or what he kept or you know. But yeah, I mean, we're also talking about a lot of old dead whites. I'm trying to think of people now that like are getting performed a lot that I'm like really, and I don't know. I mean, we're in this kind of, particularly in America, this efflorescence of like really interesting new music. So I'm more than happy when I see sort of newer names,
Oh, me too.
on
Me too.
Bob Spano's done a great job, certainly historically in Atlanta for that. But I feel like the whole kind of there's the Atlanta School, there's Chris Stefanidis, there's a lot of these people who are, I think really doing great work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm hard pressed to sort of like I don't have a strong feeling like oh I wish I didn't have to hear this person again. And mostly the people that fit that category are sort of the canon, Canon. I liked your pun there, canon
Yeah.
fodder, right? Because I think really what we're talking about, I mean, I'd like to pose the question, guys, we've heard the three Bs, right? For years now, for centuries now. Can't those spaces be more frequently taken up? Roll the dice a little bit. I mean, I guess that there's, a financial component to it, but, classical music hasn't made a ton of money in the sense that like pop music does. So like, what's at stake? Is it that people will have an opinion or not have an enjoyable experience or, not be handheld through something like life you don't get handheld through, right? So shouldn't art reflect life and reflect the times we're living now?
Totally
I don't know.
agree. All of that adventuresome spirit that Spano had in Atlanta is now gone, and
Yeah.
it's back to very conservative programming, which has its place. I'm not. We rarely hear anything composed after 1900.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's become very conservative. But um, anyway, there. Oh, unrelated to the topic, but sort of related. There's a one composer who, to me, almost never fails to produce something that I like.
Hmm.
Dvorak.
Ah, I actually totally agree with you. And the violist in my quartet would completely disagree with the both of us. And also Dvorak is great because Dvorak wasn't your sort of typically tortured artist. I mean, he had a lot of tragedy in his life, particularly was it the loss of his daughter, and so how
Yes.
that affects, the cello concerto, for example. But he seemed to be a pretty affable guy. He liked his barrels of beer. There's the whole story of Spillville, Iowa, and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and when you hear Dvorak played, I'm going to shout out my friends at Zemlinsky Quartet. These guys are all from the Czech Republic. They're based in Prague, and the way they play Dvorak, it's as if he's alive in the room. And I love the commitment with which they have to him in particular, and also Czech literature. I mean, Janáček, Jan Jirasek, for example. There are some contemporaries, Zemlinsky included, that they play with a degree of understanding and love that's just, I want to hear that every time, But yeah, Dvorak is just he's about all the things that I think I agree with. There's a certain optimism, there's a certain love for life at play, not
Right.
unlike Mozart, and he was prolific and competent. I mean, Brahms took him to town for some of his voice leading, and I think a lot of Dvorak might have been slightly improved in the additions by Brahms, and that relationship is very really fascinating. But yeah, okay, actually, a name is coming to me that I sort of don't understand why so many people are so into, and it's not really classical music, but it's adjacent, and that's Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh,
I don't get I get why, but I don't think it's that musically compelling. And
uh-huh.
I think at some point, he ran into some copyright issues. I think he lifted from Puccini and things like that. So, it makes me then wonder, what is he really about? I mean, Cats is the longest running musical of all time,
I
I
know.
think, right? Or Phantom, and I think both
Yeah.
are sort of up there. And I get it, but it's sort of like, okay, is that a space that could have been occupied by someone else? 100%, but was it still the cash cow? And so that's kind of the question I think we're wrestling with here on a certain level.
A really interesting one that was on this list of the 20 great American composers
Mm.
is John Williams.
Oh man, I think one of the greatest of all times. Absolutely.
What's great about him?
Well, okay, I think if you're gonna talk about sort of the big symphonists, right, the great romantic composers, from whether it's Central Europe or Russia, and sort of that whole diaspora of thinking about music that really ends up in LA. You have Stravinsky, you have Schoenberg, you have Eric Korngold, you have Zeisel, you have all of these guys who lived and breathed that air over there, and you see all of that pretty directly influencing Hollywood. There was a really fascinating article recently about the Wagnerization of Hollywood, and I agree with that too. But let's not forget he's only one of the strains that end up in movie music. And so, you look at some of the most famous works of John Williams, and it was George Lucas saying, "Hey man, I want you to do Eric Wolfgang Korngold, for Star Wars specifically." And so I think what John Williams has done has synthesized this Central European, Russian big romantic tradition into something that is quintessentially American, that crosses boundaries, that grabs people, in an ineffable way. I mean, think of
Yeah.
that tune from E.T. I mean, that's a sophisticated tune, right? I mean, you think of what he's doing with the intervals, but as a kid, I'm not sitting going, "That's a major seventh and a
Yeah,
perfect
right,
fourth."
right, right.
Oh my God, ET, he lives, So it works on a very primal level. And it's such a signifier of American culture. I mean, you think of ET, you think Jaws, you think Star Wars, you think, I mean, all of the big, 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 I mean, the first blockbuster, Jaws, so to be aligned with that, I'd like to take a closer look at John Williams's concert music. I know he wrote a cello concerto. I think there's like a clarinet concerto or something, but the film music,
He just
the
came
fact
out
that
with a violin concerto, was it?
oh,
Or
did he
no, a
really? Oh, I have to.
piano concerto.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So there you go. I mean, the fact that the Vienna Philharmonic, one of the most conservative, and controversially so, organizations in our field, whatever that is, the fact that they play John Williams now, I think says something. If he's considered by the Vienna Philharmonic to be a legitimate composer, then I think that says a lot. You know.
I also some of the outros for the Harry Potter movies is are quite good. They're much more modern. They're
Mhm.
much less mid-European romantic,
For sure.
and I
Well,
find
and
some of those very intriguing.
They can be really cool. I mean, and it should say something about the industry if the Harry Potter, there's an excerpt for the violin is really, really hard. And if you see that on audition lists for the top 10 symphonies. So they're saying, we're playing this enough, you better not sound bad. So if you want to, join our symphony, you got to know this Harry Potter lick. That says something to me. I mean,
Right,
it's becoming part of the
right.
canon then.
The only
So
thing, the only thing that I would ask of John Williams, and I know he really cares what I think, because I'll raise this to him on our phone call later today. But
sure.
Prokofiev put Alexander Nevsky together in a suite,
Hmm. Hmm.
the soundtrack for that he wrote, that
Right.
really stands well by itself.
Hmm.
You don't need to know the movie to appreciate the music. In
Yep.
fact, maybe the movie actually got in the way of the music. But he did make it into a suite where pieces can stand alone. I wish more John Williams would have done more of that with some of his.
You know,
I know that Star Wars comes out with a LP and it's got 12 different pieces, but
right.
uh,
That's a good point. I have a feeling also, John Williams is not getting any younger. And I have the sense that I think that his work will live on whether there's suites or not. I kind of feel like one of his arrangers or someone, you know, next to next in line can easily do that. You
right.
know, and I think that's also a product of how Hollywood works. I don't know the extent to which John Williams is responsible for his own orchestrations. I have a sense probably, but it's a whole team of people doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's the kind of thing where, I bet you they've thought about that. And as long as he's alive, as long as he's conducting, like he's been doing Boston Pops and all of that,
Yeah.
I feel like he's got a real, I think a pretty deep understanding of his place in music. And like, yeah, I mean, does John Williams? Then we can have this conversation in 25 years. Hey, man, we're listening to too many of these suites from Star
Yeah. Right.
Wars,
Right.
and,
Right.
because in a way, I would hate for that because it's such a. I mean, Pops concerts, sure, but like if we're talking about, you know, works of art designed for the concert stage, I think it's a different art form. And actually, who's interestingly straddling this now is Michael Abels. He's written a lot of the. I mean, he wrote the film scores for all of Jordan Peele's movies, right? But he also has concert music. He just wrote an opera that won a Pulitzer. So here's a guy who's very conscious of, hey, this is music that's serving a particular purpose, that of the director and the image, versus here's a piece that's meant for the concert hall for people to
Right.
be sitting and listening.
Right.
So I think, and John's done both of that. So I feel like he's very aware of that. So maybe that's why you aren't seeing the suites. He's like, listen, that's movie music. That's over here.
Yeah.
If you listen to my concert music, I got my piano concerto, I got my cello concerto, So I think you already see that in his output.
Well, which takes me to Korngold.
Mm.
I'm sure you know his violin concerto,
No,
obviously,
I love it so much. Yeah.
but the last movement is so movie.
And the second movement, which he took themes from I think Juarez,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah, and yeah.
so
One
like
of them, yeah,
yeah. So Korngold's interesting. I actually think Korngold is I wonder how much he struggled with the form of film music because I think first and foremost, Korngold is a great composer of concert music of operas. I can't remember if he has a symphony, but certainly he's got the violin concerto. He's got a lot of stuff. He's got oh my god, Opus 23. He's got the piano quintet. I mean, this guy was very fluent in sort of the traditional forms. I think he probably struggled with film music, and he's writing such lush scores. Imagine rewind to like 1939. You're doing Juarez and the director says, "Hey, Eric, you have the violin screaming right in the register where all the dialogue is. Can you edit that?" And he goes, "But it's a masterpiece." Like that's why
yeah,
Schoenberg and Stravinsky never did film music because they wanted to write the music first and then have the film people do their art on that
right,
music.
right, right.
So
And
they got
that's
it
not
sort
the
of
way it
completely
works.
not the way
Yeah,
it works these days. So I think, yeah, I wonder about that because like it is telling to hear these unbelievably rich, beautiful scores written by Korngold, and you do miss the dialogue sometimes because the violins are screaming right where you need to hear. Like, is that a
hmm
T or is that a K or is it the Prince or is it?
hmm
You got to
yeah,
be, and I think that's why again this is totally uh, musicologists will cringe about all of my theories that are unsubstantiated by the academy. But I feel like you're seeing a lot more cello solos now because it lies a little bit lower. You know, you can see sort of general trends in pop music. Things are getting slower and there's more minor keys. Someone did a big study about that. But also, I think you're seeing, oh, violin is a little too high because it sits right where dialogue, where you need to hear those fricatives. You need to hear like actually what are the words that are being said. So that I just think about the most recent film score that we were involved in with Disclaimer. Man, beautiful use of the cello. I shout out to Phineas for that.
Sure, sure. Well, it certainly is a different medium and makes very different demands on composers. And really, they are handmaidens to the producers and the
Yeah.
directors.
Well,
Um,
and I think you have varying versions of that relationship. I can certainly talk to the relationship between Phineas and Alfonso. I mean, Alfonso was very involved. He's known as an auteur kind of guy, so of course he wants to have his hands in everything. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you, there's this thing in film music called temp love, where the director puts the temp music up and then is sort of editing to that track or to that score, which is really just a hodgepodge, right? And then the composer has to write new music that sort of does what the temp music does. But
right,
then if the director is too wedded to the temp music, then oftentimes the composer is at a disadvantage. I
right,
mean, famously, what was it, 2001: Space Odyssey? Kubrick had hired a composer to write the score and didn't tell him that he wasn't going to use any of his music, and that's how Penderecki got in the mix and like Belu Danube and all this stuff. And the composer's at the premiere going, "Where's my music?"
right, right.
Like, but what a shock. I'd hate to be that guy. Gosh.
It's like Eyes Wide Shut that uses Shostakovich's Second Waltz, which is
Sure.
actually probably my favorite piece of music of all time.
Oh my gosh, really? The
Yeah,
jazz
because
wall?
it's still beautiful, yet a little bit off kilter, where
Hmm.
a melody is carried by a trombone, which is so different than traditional waltz. I really like it. So,
Cool.
anyway, and it fits the movie quite well. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. But anyway, all right. There was something else I was going to mention about movie. Anyway, I interviewed 4 or 5 different people who have written for movies
Oh,
and
cool.
really gave me a great deal of sensitivity to how different it is than
Totally.
simply sitting down with a blank piece of paper and going for it,
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. Well, again, it's the relationship of what music can do over time. And if in Tchaikovsky's time you didn't not only did you not have the medium of film, the seventh art or whatever, um, but like you didn't really have as many time constraints. You were also wealthy and had leisure time, and so you might as well take up an hour and a half to
Right.
say what you say. Whereas like now you think of some of these music cues or for film, 30 seconds, 25 seconds,
Yeah.
2 seconds,
Yeah.
you got to get it done and it's got to do the thing it needs to do to amplify or take away from or whatever is happening on screen. So yeah, it's a completely different thing.
Anyway, we got a minute 53 seconds left.
Oh my gosh. All right.
All right. Fun talking.
As always,
Great
it's
stuff.
good. Thank
Great
you.
stuff.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're doing
And
well.
I usually post these things unedited. So,
Sounds great.
all
Yeah.
right.
All
And
righty.
good luck with when's your next thing? You said it was going to be in Virginia?
Yeah, I start this weekend, and then I'm actually playing in my hometown with Ataka on September 14th. It's going to be my father's work, string quartet 1.5, premiere by Michael Ippolito and the Verdi Quartet. We're calling it La Grande Bellezza, so that's going to be really fun.
Excellent. Give him my regards.
Absolutely will. Thank
And
you.
your brother also, although I've never met him.
Yes, yes, and he's doing really well. He's the ballet season starts again up in Philadelphia pretty soon. So
All right.
yeah,
All right, man. Take care.
you too. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Talk again.
All right, ciao, ciao.
Bye.